there's that. Let me go close my email down so it's not dinging. All right, good. Got that done. All right, perfect. About to go live, she said. All right, cool. All right, should be so. Yeah. Oh, we're live. Look at there. The live screen just popped up on the screen. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining another one of our Securing Success webinars that are, excuse me, for my marketing folks, get on me, live streaming event. Welcome, everybody joining in from LinkedIn. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun. And when you take IRS and fun, most people don't think that. I see you, Velena. But this is going to be a great conversation. We're going to talk about IRS 4557. What does it mean? What makes up the whole thing, IRS 4557? Because a lot of people are confused on that. They think the WISP is which is the main part, that everything to it. But we're going to have a discussion in that, very specific questions, and what does it mean to you out there? So joining me today, I've got Miss Velena McRae and Darren Pauls and David Cox. And so I'm going to ask each one of them to give me a quick little introduction to themselves, and then we'll move on from there. Miss Velena.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Velena McRae, and I am with the Internal Revenue Service, and we do have fun. We know how to have fun. I don't know why you would say that.
But I think it's fun.
I've been with the IRS for about 30 years. I started when I was 2 years old, so I'm 32. So, don't choke. Okay. So, like I said, we know how to have fun, but I've been with them for many years, and hopefully today I will share some information that will be of interest to everybody.
Mr. Darren?
As Wayne said, I'm Darren Pauls. I'm with Foster MSP out of Chandler, Arizona. I actually started as a tax professional way back when, working in the Chicago market for a number of accounting firms over the years before I got into the technology side of things. So a little bit of background on tax preparation, the data that's brought through those systems, worked on a lot of those systems myself back then, and continue to do so with accounting firms as clients today, helping them with managed services as well as some of the compliance challenges.
Mr. David.
David Cox. I'm the Chief Security Officer here at AvTek. Been in IT for over 30 years now and specializing in cybersecurity and compliance for the last 15 or so.
Okay. So with that, what we're going to do, the format here is we're going to have some questions. We're going to dive into them, and we'll kind of round robin it. But also, if you got any questions, don't hesitate to put them in and into the Q&A question. There it will bring up to it. We'll see what goes on and be able to address those questions for you. So from that, let's talk about the first thing, the elephant on the wall. What is IRS Publication 4557, and what is it essential for tax professionals? And I believe it was June 9th of 2023 is when the release of this coming about. And from my perspective, IRS 4557 is a framework, is a guideline on how to protect taxpayer data information. Okay. And in it, it's actually two components. There is the written information security plan, which most people capture that piece, but it's also called out in there in small letters, information security program. And so to have your actual IRS 4557 in place, it's actually those two primary components, the plan and your actual tactical side, as I call it, the actual program that's actually meeting the plan requirements. That's what we see. But from that perspective, we see a lot of people thinking that WISP is the only part of it. And from that aspect of it, I'm going to ask Velena, from your perspective, did I say that correctly? Did I interpret it correctly? Hopefully I'm doing it right. Or is there other pieces to it that I missed?
No, you did interpret that correctly. So the publication, it provides an overview. It's a step-by-step process for tax tax preparers to put their plan in place. It gives them what they need to do. How they do it is up to them. We just give the framework. This is what you need to do, because everybody's plan is going to be different depending on their business, the size of it, what type of clients they have. So everybody's plan is different. But like you said, they have to do the first part. They put the plan in place, but the most important part is maintaining it. You put this plan in place in 2025 and you don't do anything else to it. By the time we get down the road to 2027 and you actually have a data breach or something happens, the things that you put into place until 2025 may not even, work, the things that you had. So you have to maintain it. You have to test it. You have to educate your employees if you have any. So there's a lot of stuff on the back end that you need to do with this, plan.
And that's the part where I see a lot of it, because David, I mean, we get involved lots of time with people that, hey, I want to get my WISP done, written information security plan. And then when we talk to them, we find out is they think that if they have just a written plan, they're good. They don't have to do anything else until next year.
Yep.
Let's dive a little bit better, because Velena brought up a very good part. What I call tactical side of it, she's saying the monitoring, the testing, and all that. Well, a plan doesn't do that. A program does. So let's dive a little bit more in and get a little bit more teeth to what Velena is talking about, the ISP, what the components in the ISP. And Darren, you can chime in whenever. I mean, let's put a little bit more context to what we're talking about there.
I walked into a meeting just a few weeks ago with a CPA firm that had a WISP. So they handed me the WISP and we started going through it. And it was a download of the template that the IRS provides everybody. Mm-hmm. And it had their name filled in. It had some information about who was in charge of the different departments that needed to be assigned people. It had a list of computers, most of the assets, I would say. No cell phones, even though they have email and cell phones, so they didn't have some of their assets defined. But they thought that's all they had to have. So when I got to a section, I said, well, how are you doing this? They said, well, we don't really know. And when you get a response like that, then you know that they're either relying on somebody else, and that should be referenced in the program, or they should have a program that explains how they're doing the different things. But they honestly thought that just downloading the template and filling in a few blanks gave them the protection they needed to satisfy that requirement from the IRS. And we get that a lot.
Darren, in adding to that, when we talk about, and it really becomes that program, there's two pieces of the actual tools that we're deploying, but also the procedures used to deploy them, test them, and document the results of that, and how that ties back to the WISP, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What I've seen in talking to a number of firms and preparers is they, as you said, they understand the requirement of a WISP. What I think they don't understand is the WISP, as you said, is just the plan. Similar to like building a house. You create an architectural plan, but you've got to build the house. The purpose of the plan is to facilitate the building of the structure, correct? So they don't realize that that plan is supposed to be an assessment as well. It's supposed to trigger an assessment which looks at your environment. What are all your assets, as David mentioned? Which ones require protecting? Most importantly, in regards to IRS 4557, is where is the taxpayer information? How is it accessible? Who has access to it? Figuring all that out ahead of time and then applying not only the safeguards, the tooling, but the processes behind the proper way to utilize that information, as well as you mentioned, the monitoring of it. One thing a lot of them don't realize is activity monitoring is a requirement. And that can be anything from what systems are doing or what people are doing, who's accessing what, when, where, that type of thing. So there's a lot more to it than just, checking the box, so to speak, that we have a plan created. What we call the threat landscape, which is the threat out there against businesses, is constantly changing. So even the firms that do a really good job of it, as Velena mentioned, that has to be revisited on at least an annual basis, sometimes even more often, especially if there's been a change in the business. In events like acquisitions, mergers, you're kind of starting over to an extent. but less drastic things can trigger events as well that would require to go back and assess. We see all the time working in the industry, tooling becomes obsolete. One product, 6 months ago was the best thing out there to address a particular threat. Now there's other products that are doing a better job. So it's a constant changing, ever evolving thing that has to be revisited on a regular
Let's give an
basis.
example of the elements that's in that information security program, because we're talking about monitoring and testing and stuff like that, and that's pretty generic of what we're talking. But and this is open to everybody. Anybody wants to inject. What specific types of elements are we talking about? Tools are we talking about that's doing this proactive monitoring, testing, things of that nature? What's some of the areas we're talking about there? David, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, you need to track access to the data that you're enforced to protect. So you need to know when folders are accessed. You need to understand, if you have a tax program, how often that tax information is accessed, who the client was, when it was accessed, who accessed it. All that needs to be logged so that there's a paper trail. Not a paper
Right.
trail necessarily, but an electronic trail, an evidence file of who opened it, who accessed it. Were they supposed to access it? So not only do you need the report, someone needs to review the report to make sure that the people accessing the data were authorized to access the data.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Does everyone need access? No, everyone does not need access to all the information. One of the things that we see or we come into contact with is that disgruntled employees, and we know about disgruntled employees. They will access information that they are not supposed to just because, they're mad, or somebody paid them to get them this information, or they just want to wreak havoc before they leave, before they get fired, or, for whatever reason. So as soon as an employee is terminated, that information needs to be changed. Their passwords, taken out of the system, their access to whatever systems they have need to be revoked right then, and not, oh, I'll get to it, because that's, really important. We get a lot of calls from tax practitioners who say, oh, an employee left, and before they left, they came in early morning, they came in late that night after the business was closed, they accessed information. So that's really an important step, to control who has access, why they have access, and then revoking that access.
That's a great example of the process behind all of this as well. Think of all the applications that tax professionals use, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus applications, the amount of time it takes to offboard an employee, and what is that process supposed to look like? Do you start that process before they're terminated? If it's a situation of an employee termination, typically you would start locking down all these areas and revoking their access. So you hit on a great point that this information security program isn't just software and tooling and multi-factor, it's also process. And going through assessing the risk and the risk assessment, looking at the processes on how you conduct your business, how you onboard employees, how you offboard employees, how you restrict access, how you monitor that, all comes into play in the information security program.
And what I take it in, and you come in, so password managers, endpoint detection and response, managed detection and response, network monitoring, backup, restore testing. Where do you have it? Identity access management? A lot of what we're talking about from the data governance standpoint. Who has access to what? That's in identity access management. Do you have? These are things that the program deploys and lays out what you're running to meet the written information security plan. So this is what we've been talking about here. So let's take it another way. This is for you, Ms. Velena. What are the most common compliance gaps the IRS sees among smaller CPA firms and sole practitioners?
Okay, well, actually that information has not been shared with us. The most common, what they see. And when I say they, I'm talking about RICS or the Federal Trade Commission or things of that nature.
Okay.
But I will share what some of us in communication, the ones who actually take some of these data breach calls, and we interview tax practitioners. Some of the things that we see, disgruntled employees, like I just mentioned, we see that a lot. We see the the tax practitioner accessing their files from a remote location, and they do not have a VPN on their system. So they're out, maybe they're in a class, they're in a training, and they're like, oh, I'm just gonna, check my emails right quick, or I'm gonna send some information or receive some information, not realizing that they are not protected and someone can steal their information. We've seen that. So that is a big, gap. And it doesn't have to be a small firm. We're talking about the big firms too. Emails, actually, most of 90%, that's a statistic that they did give us. 90% of data breaches start with an email, believe it or not. It starts with an email. We get the fake emails from, well, we all know how to spot spam and phishing, but these are from people who are pretending to be clients who say, I have this issue, blah, blah, blah. So they actually start the process of becoming a client. Maybe information is requested from them. So they send a second email and they say the information is attached. In that information is the malware, is that virus that will infect that computer. So we do see that a lot. We have also seen, and we got this statistic from our CI, criminal investigation, clients actually walking into the business with a flash drive.
Mhm.
What does the person do? They stick that flash drive into their computer, and that's all she wrote. So, they kind of advise, have a standalone computer. If somebody brings you a flash drive, don't put it in your main computer. Have a standalone computer that does not have any other information on it to download or to look at what they are giving you. So those are some of the things that we come across a lot in these data breach interviews that we are conducting.
And that's that the USB piece. People get hit with that, all the time, and that's the reason why we always also say that perfect having a separate computer, but also when that computer, part of what's in the information security program, when we talk about the EDR, endpoint detection response, when you put that in there, it's going to scan that to make
Yes.
sure you don't have ransomware jumping and things like that. If you don't have that, even though you put it on this separate one, depending on what you're doing, you're still going to get that data off of it somehow. And if you don't have that scan, you still, depending on what your copy process is or how you move it, could
Yes.
put it through there. So that's where the MDR, the monitor detection response, and the EDR, those things in place. It goes for looking for those Trojans, looking for the ransomware, looking for those things proactively. If we see it, then that's going to proactively isolate that. That's what's called, stopping what you'll hear out in the term 0-day attack is we're stopping it right there. It's not going to go any further. But if you don't have those pieces in there, even though you got the WISP written, if you don't have those pieces of the program in place, you're still just in the same spot if you don't even have a WISP written.
Right.
Because that's the important part of it.
That is definitely an important part of it. And then here's something else that we get a lot when we're talking to these tax practitioners. They have this plan. They know to call us. They call us. But what's the next step? What is your data theft recovery plan? Do you have that plan put in place? Did you encrypt your data? Did you back up your data? Is it on a separate drive or in the cloud or somewhere else? And a lot of times the answer is no, and they have no idea what to do, where to go, who to contact. So, there's another piece to that, like we mentioned at the very beginning. What's that
Absolutely.
other piece?
Okay, let's look here. I'm on Darren. I'm gonna give you this one because this is one of your favorite ones that me and you converse on all the time. When a tax professional checks the box on question 11 of the form W-12, most everybody knows it as the P-10 form, regarding 4557 and a WISP, what is the IRS expecting of the professional regarding the compliance? And I know that is saying what is the IRS thing, but what is the response you've gotten from all of the CPAs or tax preparers that you've talked to when you bring up, hey, did you check this box? And they say yes, and then you ask them, do you understand what you just signed up to? Before we let Velena say what the ramifications of it is,
Yeah.
because I know she wants to.
The easy answer is I've heard all varying degrees on all
You got
ends
some
of the
feedback.
spectrum. As
Do
far
y'all
as
hear that feedback too?
Yeah.
getting feedback,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting feedback a little bit there, buddy.
Let's see if I can turn it down here.
Yeah.
How about now?
It's good enough. You can get by with. I don't know what James there, but good.
Okay. The quick answer to that, I've heard answers that are on both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. Everything from we have a WISP, but we know it's not complete to our satisfaction, all the way up to they've got a WISP, they've got an information security program, they're dialed in, they're going above and beyond. So I can only guess what the IRS is expecting. I would defer to Velena for this, but my guess is they're expecting you to have a WISP and to be implementing it, I would assume.
Right, you are right. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about that, or maybe they do. The IRS will give you an instruction or say something that we expect. You're checking this box that you are acknowledging that you are supposed to have a WISP and you're following all the laws. And that's kind of where it ends. So the question is, well, what does that mean? Well, the IRS expects you to know what that means. How does it apply to you? What the laws are, because if you are audited, for lack of a better word, or something happens, you cannot say, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do it. Wait, now you check this box. So you said that you are acknowledging that you are supposed to do it. So then, that leads into something else. But we don't tell people how to do it, what manner to do it. We just say, here are some good steps, but you have to do what's best for your firm. And so that's what the IRS is expecting, that you have this plan in place, you are committed to this plan, and you're doing all the steps, the front part and the back part, you're educating people, and that you are doing the best that you can to keep the information protected, that's in your control.
Well, and through the publications as well that are referred to in that question, especially 4557, refer to FTC Safeguards and NIST for small businesses. So one thing that a lot of people I've talked to don't realize is that's really where the bulk of a lot of the compliance is, especially for the FTC. And my guess is, and maybe you can shed some light on this, the IRS is queuing it up saying you need to take a look at this, you need to implement it, and you're referring to a larger body, the FTC Safeguards, and then NIST best practices, because those are the bodies that are also regulating this industry, and their requirements are even more detailed.
Right. And I know Wayne and I had talked about this earlier. So here's that big surprise, Wayne. And I think that may be something that you had wanted to talk to earlier. But now that Darren brought it up, the FTC, we are working hand in hand with them. And these are actually their rules. So they are definitely looking at this. They're doing the monitoring. The information that we collect or the things that happen, the data breach information, that goes up to them. So they are looking at this, and any organization or tax practitioner that is found in default is up to the Federal Trade Commission. So it's not just IRS. We're talking about the Federal Trade Commission will get involved. And then in the instance of tax practitioners, we're also talking about the OPR, which is professional review. They could get in trouble with them and audited by them. And then if it's really criminal, we're bringing in criminal investigation. So it's not just us, it's other entities, and probably include some of the state entities too, like the Federation of Tax Administrators. So not just us.
Well, this is I'm gonna bring in an audience question just that come up a little bit ago, but I was letting it get a little further. He says, if there's a breach, what are the required steps for IRS and client notification, and how fast must I act?
As soon as you realize there's a breach, as soon as you realize it, you need to call us. Call us, like right then. And we're going to do an interview with you, because if you can't get a hold of us, leave a message and we're going to call you back as soon as possible, because we're trying to call back within 1 to 2 hours once that happens, because there are a lot of things that have to be put into place. We have to, put a hold on the P10, on the EFIN, so that other returns can't be filed if they have collected this information. So we're doing all of that. We realize that you are busy and you're trying to work, so you need a new number. We need to get a new number issued to you. So that's one of the things that we ask, is that you call us immediately. You need to contact the local police, let them know that a data breach has occurred. Then your insurer, there are a lot of insurer plans that have, steps that you need to follow with them. You need to let your clients know. If their information was stolen, then you do need to let them know. You should have a form letter on file that you can immediately let them know. Hi, this is what happened. This is what I am doing in this process. This is what you need to be aware of. If you receive any type of information from the IRS, be it maybe a rejected filed return, maybe they receive a refund in their bank account that they did, that they know they're not supposed to receive, if they receive transcripts that they didn't request, anything like that needs to be notified to the tax practitioner. That's why they need to let their clients know, this is what happened. These are the things that may happen, but these are the steps that I am taking to make sure that you are protected.
Now that brings up an interesting point. And me and David and Darren's discussed this, so I'll ask you this. If their P10 got hacked and fraudulent's coming in there, and obviously you gonna lock that down, what are the things that tax preparers got to prove to them that they got in place before you cut another P10? Because if you cut another P10 to them and they don't have the security things in that, that P10 could get hacked right off the bat. Again, it's kind of like what we say is, if you got an email and you got hacked and you don't go clean that up, as soon as you do the same thing again, they're still there. They're going to get it infiltrated. So this is one of the areas where we find that if you haven't done the information security program and implemented those things, and there's another piece to it I'll go to, but is there steps that IRS is going to go look at to validate before you cut them another P10?
Yes, there are steps. Now, once we take in the information, we do the interviewing process. We submit everything to the Return Integrity and Compliance Service Office. They will actually call the tax practitioner, because during our interview process, we are collecting information of all the practitioners in the office who actually have a CIF, who have a PTN number, or things of that nature. We want all the information so that we can look at everything. And so Ricks is going to call them, do their interview. They're going to ask about their security system, the computers. Have the computers been scrubbed? Has your IT person come in? What are they saying? So there are questions to make sure that protections are put in place before they give another number to them.
Okay, that's kind of what we were thinking, to come in there. And before another question, but before I put it there, the interesting part about when you're talking about those things on the P10, and you brought up about calling your cybersecurity insurance company. Well, those folks, the things they're going to look for being able to pay a claim out, are the exact same things that's deployed as part of the information security program. So if you don't have the program in place, now you're two holes deep in what you're in, because now the cybersecurity is not going to be able to take care of it, because this is one of the first things when you call them, the breach coach is going to get involved. Well, the breach coach is the insurance's lawyer asking you these questions about what you got in place. So everybody needs to understand that if you do one thing, it actually helps you in multiple things. By doing the information security program, it actually helps you with your cybersecurity insurance. And if you got those things, you're reducing your risk. Therefore, there's a lot of insurance companies that will give you preferential pricing because you've mitigated risk. So there's advantages of doing this more than just the IRS piece, but other pieces of your business. So
Right.
Follow-up question is there an IRS contact or form designated for reporting security incidents?
Yes, so you can go to irs.gov, and in the search, you can just type data breach, or a stakeholder liaison. And depending on what state you are in, you have certain areas or certain phone numbers to contact for the data breach. And I don't know if, I don't know how to type in the chat thing, because this is
I'm getting it for you right now.
Okay,
I'm
but
just
I
going
was
to put
going
it
to
here.
say, yeah, you can put my name and phone number in there and email address, and you can contact me because, we take this information, and if you are in California or wherever, we can make sure that the correct liaison contacts you to do this data breach, because we have a whole cadre of people. That's what they do. They do the intake for the data breach.
Excellent. I put a link to the reporting unauthorized disclosures page. That's the base level
Okay.
discover
Yes.
for that. And then Katie will be putting your information in your contact information into the chat as well.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Before you go to the next question, I do want to bring up about the EFIN and the PTIN. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but tax practitioners can check their numbers on irs.gov through e-services. And so that's another recommendation. Check it weekly, check it, bi-weekly, twice a week, however many times you want to see how many returns have been filed using your PTIN or EFIN. I mean, if you know that you've only done 25 returns during the filing season, and you go in and it says that you filed 150, then you have a problem. So, yeah, that's something that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think Darren, you was talking about that the other day when we was talking about being able to go in and check and do that right there. Okay.
Yeah, IRS
right.
and others suggest minimum weekly of doing that. If it was me, I would do it more often, personally.
Cool. Excellent. So we got in the chat, Katie has shared her Velena's email address as well as phone number. So that is there as well. So question number 5 is, are there any enforcement trends around 4557 that the professional tax preparers community should be aware of?
Enforcement trends, I'm not sure. They don't, they haven't told us that what they're doing, what they're looking at, how they look at it. That's just like a regular tax return. They don't tell us specifically. They just say that there are red flags, if there are big changes or, a big difference in what a tax practitioner may do from year to year, that may be considered a red flag, or even month, to month. So they don't share that information with us about the trends and what they're looking at. But again, that's the Federal Trade Commission. They're the ones who created these rules, and they're the ones who are looking at it. We're just in partnership with them. So I guess kind of what they say goes for us.
A lot of people come in there and look at it. When you say IRS 4557 is coming near you, that's a very common answer. Usually where we see where more teeth is put to it, you got to pay attention to is like what Darren brought up is what FTC is doing. Paying attention to FTC, because that's where a lot of additional things are applied. And I mean, Darren, you was doing some of the research on that and some of the other different things. What did you see that people should be aware of from looking at it from the FTC standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, it's a much larger body of information to get through and to understand. If you look at the CFR on it, 16 CFR through Part 314, it's a couple of maybe 8 to 12 pages of information that's sort of outlined out. But if you dig into the detail behind that in the federal registers, you'll get a really good sense of what they're trying to achieve, the spirit of the regulation, and they even define terms like what is a qualified security person or individual. Those types of things that clarify a lot of questions that I had when I first looked at 4557, as well as the FTC Safeguards, just the high level of it. They focus heavily on risk assessments, monitoring, that qualified person that's going to handle this program for you. It has to be someone with knowledge, experience, and expertise in the area of information security, as well as information security programs and all the things that are entailed with all of that. It goes into a lot of detail that when you start reading through that, you really get a sense of what they're trying to achieve. And here it is in a nutshell. And they say this multiple times in these documents. They're looking for you to protect customer information. Your goal is to protect customer information. So you have to keep that at the back of your mind with every decision, every assessment that happens and how you respond to it, what tooling you put in. You have to be constantly thinking, is it protecting customer information? And a lot of this is fluid. And the FTC doesn't get very specific on a lot of the guidance, and they do so purposely because you can't get specific because, again, this is a changing thing. Changes on a regular basis. The threats change, the technology changes, the requirements are changing. They're refreshing it. Maybe not on an annual basis right now, but as major things come out, FTC has made some changes through, and they've reported them through the registers. Again, that's where the detail is. I would encourage any tax preparer, you're probably used to reading these types of documents. I would go look at the CFR and the associated registers and read through that. It's a really good commentary on what they're trying to achieve, and even has objections from the industries like the National Auto Dealers Association had some objections to some of the requirements, and they gave their answers as to why they agreed or didn't agree. It gives you a really good background on all of this.
And David, I'll come back around and come to part of this. When you started talking about, who's authorized, who has the knowledge and things of this nature. And I know for 10 years you did work for the state of Ohio's Attorney General's office doing a lot of this type of stuff. And you got this little acronym behind your name, CISSP. But from your perspective in deploying this, what a lot of people don't realize is who are those authorized people, both from the tax preparer standpoint, CPA or whatever it may be, but also the third party that may be helping them. Can you shed a little bit of light of both of those components about what people need to be looking for to make sure they got the right people with the right knowledge and responsibility in doing this?
Yeah, so something we ran across a lot is wherever that federal taxpayer information is held, usually in a program, the first mistake people make when they hire new employees is they give every employee access to every entity in that portal. And that's just not how least privilege works. You don't have any one person that's going to manage every account that they're managing, that firm is managing. So the people should only have access to the accounts that they're going to be actively working in. That's the only way you're going to keep that as clean as you can. On the vendor side of things, you don't give vendors access to your network without justification. They shouldn't be able to get into the network unmonitored. Every connection in should be logged with a reason as to why they logged in. And a lot of that is available through tools that an MSP can provide. So we can check the RMM logs, give them access through an remote management module. We can track when they're getting in. We can force them to put a reason for connecting in, as well as a time that they've been connected. And again, collecting all that data is great. Reviewing that is essential, because if you have a vendor that logs in and stays connected for two days, that's a problem, because nobody's sitting at a computer for 2 days doing anything, but that channel of communication is open that entire time. I think one comment I wanted to make about this whole thing, and I've had a lot of meetings where the tax preparers get overwhelmed. I'm really good at taxes. I'm a tax professional. I don't understand all this IT stuff. And they don't need to. They need to work with someone like us. But the person like us needs to help them develop the program, detail everything, list ourselves as the person that's responsible for this or that or the other thing. They need to have a contract that spells out where the responsibility lies with the MSP, where the responsibility lies with them. And that needs to be a clear document to them.
Well, that's a very important part, because there's, once Congress had defined what a managed service provider was about 3 years ago, we have what's called shared responsibility, shared liability. Doesn't mean that the client gives up the responsibility and fiduciary responsibility, but we are sharing it. That's the reason why we're very, we don't take on clients unless they have our security stack in place, period. Because of that reason, to protect both of us and go do that. But that's the goal, is protecting that information, have a process to it that goes and protects you. But one of the things I guess also to understand is there's this process, and you come into WISP and go into this, and who's the security officer? Okay. The security officer is not always the person that is a security expert, but they are the person responsible from the client side, the tax preparer side, there's overall responsibility of the program. Now, they may have a third party that is providing a CISSP and have that same security responsibility on there, where it's two people doing it, but that's the type of stuff that has to be defined. And a lot of times we're seeing people are not defining that. So they don't know, like Velena, you were saying, who do you contact in the instant response? Who's responsible? Who do you contact? What's the next step? If you don't have that stuff to find out, then that creates a big hole.
Right.
And if
Right.
you don't review it every year, you could leave big holes, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because
So,
people leave. You have somebody's name down. You don't check. You don't update it, and that person's been gone. For 2 years, and something happens. You're like, oh well, we never put somebody back in place. So now what do you do?
so got another question for you, Velena.
Uh-oh.
This will be an interesting one to have you answer. Has the IRS ever penalized someone for lacking a WISP, even if no breach occurred?
I will have to check on that and find out. That's a good question. I don't know that one, but that is a good question if they have penalized somebody for that. That would have
Well,
to go under a practitioner audit. And a lot of times we just don't, on the IRS side, we don't go out unless there is a taxable reason. There's something going on there. Like I said, so now FTC may, but I will have to find out about that one, about the IRS, if that's something that has happened.
and it's an interesting part when we start, especially when you think about the P10 on that
Hmm.
question number 11. You check that box saying you have it, and
Right,
you don't. You just committed fraud in a way
right.
because you're saying you have something that you don't. So you're already exposing yourself, and this is
Hmm.
not hard to go do. We've got sole proprietor CPAs we've done this work for, and we do it, and it's affordable for them to go do. And the what we always explain to folks is if and when, because it's not, sooner or later something's going to happen that goes on, especially if you're not putting the things in place. It's a matter of when, not if.
Right.
It's going to happen. We've had clients that we've tried to talk to, and then they said, "Oh, I don't want to do this," and then they come back. We've been hacked. Can you help us? And then they put stuff in place. But by that time, depending on what you're doing and how long it takes you to get a new P10, the biggest impact we see is customer loyalty, customer trust. Because if you can't get there, if this happens on March 15th, you don't get a P10 until over a month later, which it's a very easily that could happen, depending if you're
Hmm.
not meeting all the pieces. Then clients got to go somewhere else to get their returns done. So that's, one, having lost revenue, but lost clients, reputation, things of that nature is a big impact. So,
Right.
um, and I don't know, Darren, some things about this, and I know from the CPA standpoint in getting their certificate, stuff like that, there's things around things of that nature that I don't know, lack of a better term, you told me something about it's kind of like an honor code in a way, in what you explained to me before.
Yeah, there's professional ethics that come into play. There's other, there's state regulation. We talked about FTC, is driving a lot of this. There's a lot of other ways you can get hit. I have seen articles out there, Wayne, on what you mentioned about sort of getting hit indirectly by the IRS or the FTC on an investigation. Some other event happened. There was an investigation, and then they stumbled across they were lacking in 4557 compliance, and then they got roped into that. So it just added on and on. There's some good studies out there too. I think IBM did one of them that also talks about what is the true cost of a breach for an organization like someone subject to FTC safeguards. And you'd be surprised that penalties and financial type fines are third on the list. Above it is disruption of business, revenue loss, loss of customer, client loyalty, client trust, all of that, which arguably are worse than financial fines. They have a long lasting impact. So my take on 4557 and all the other great publications that the IRS has put out and guidance on this, they're really doing you a favor to address risk management in your business,
Right.
which
Right.
everybody should be doing, whether you're regulated under compliance or not. You need to look at what are the threats to your business, physical risks, electronic risks, risk of reputation loss, risk of disruption of the business to where you're not generating revenue. These information security programs address a lot of that.
Right.
Well,
One of the
and
first cases that we had from a tax practitioner, I believe it was back in 2012 or 2013, and he was in Connecticut. And this was when like ID theft and all of this stuff was like really, coming onto the scene. And this was not in place. And he worked so hard. He lost so much, as in terms of, his trust from his clients and things of that nature. But he worked really hard to rebuild it back up. He worked with us. I know he came on and he was a presenter at some of our in-house workshops and things of that nature, explaining what happened, detailing what he had to do to build his business back up, and giving suggestions to other tax practitioners. He was on the speaking circuit for a minute there, going out and telling about this data breach. So you're right, Darren, it does affect the client's trust. Can you build it back up? And I know some tax practitioners, they don't want to send a letter out. They're like, oh no, I don't want my other clients to know that this happened. But you don't know if their number has been stolen. So you have to say something. You can't just take the attitude of, I'm going to sit back and wait. And I want to share some statistics with you right now, if I
that'd be
can.
great. Go for it.
Okay. And actually, this is just about Texas. I just asked for the information for Texas. And this is data breach statistics from January to February 23rd, 2025, compared to 2024. Okay. So, well, I'm sorry, not Texas, the whole United States, nationwide. So last year, the first 5 months, we only had 173 tax practitioners to report data breaches. So, but that affected 177,000 taxpayers, just from those incidents that reported. This year, during that same time, January 1 through May 23, we've had 649 tax practitioners affected in that same time frame. 649 and 281,000 tax clients. So, I mean, it's out there, because just think about it. One tax practitioner may have 100, 200, however many clients. So we're looking at a lot. And that's why the IRS is really heavy into talking about data breach, protecting your clients, protecting yourself. This is a big issue. It's nothing to be taken lightly.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to, and it actually that works into it, but, back to the question about IRS ever penalize someone for lacking a WISP, even if there's no breach. Well, one of the things you have to keep in mind is, and this is where supply chain comes into play, is you could get brought into the investigation even though you didn't get breached, but the e-filer that actually filed, that's also, e-filers are also subject to IRS 4557. And the e-filer is actually the one that got infiltrated, being as the origination of the file starts from you going to the e-filer. Now the investigators are going to look at the e-filer and then reverse back through the supply chain to the source from there. Now, how does that play? Well, part of your security program is how you're making sure your vendors are protecting the information you provide them. So if there's no evidence where you ask the e-filer for their security posture, now that brings you into it. Now, if you have that, which is one of the things we do, is we call vendor management, is we create a questionnaire, we send it out to one of your vendors and saying, do you have these in place? They respond with their response. Now you've made best efforts to make sure the information you're handing someone has been protected. Now, e-filer then is infiltrated. And when they're coming back, they validate you've done your best practice, you have your things in place. That now alleviates you and protects you from being actually the one that gets hammered on it. And there's precedents out there for this across, you name it. All right. But that's how you could be brought into something, even though you didn't get hacked. And then when they find it and you don't have a WISP and you have that check mark, now you're exposed for that issue and could be dragged into the overall issue of the hack. hopefully that makes sense, because I've seen that actually happen for that. So that's another way you could actually be brought into it, even though you didn't get breached.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it's common across every industry. And now that's one of the big things that FTC really started targeting was the actual supply chain, because that's the weak point of people were looking to protect themselves, but they wasn't conscious about when they transferred information to an entity, a vendor or supplier or whatever, is that being protected?
Right.
Since I didn't ask for that and I handed off, the source of the data started from me. So now they got to come all the way back to find out where did it happen, and did you take diligence against it to protect it? And it started opening up that scenario. And it actually affects MSPs out there. If there are MSPs listening, there's precedence for this where you are in that chain, because shared responsibility, shared liability. So if you're not making sure that's being done both sides, you're opening your own self up as part of that whole program.
Right. And that's why tax practitioners, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go for
I
it.
was going to say that's why tax practitioners need to recognize and know the signs of data breach. It's not always very clear that you were breached. It may be your clients coming in saying, hey, I got this letter asking for this. And then client number 2 saying, I got this letter from the IRS. And then, you need to start connecting the dots. Why do you have more than one client asking you for this information, or more than one client saying these things are happening? That is definitely a clear sign.
Okay, we're coming up. The last question was kind of just a question to kind of wrap all this together in a nice little bow, and then just open up for discussion for anybody. If anybody else got any other questions, keep bringing it up. What are the most prevalent events that cause IRS to investigate a tax professional for compliance with 4557? I think we've kind of covered this multiple different ways. And even like the last question we just answered. But obviously the most prevalent, I think you brought up right at the very beginning, is actually having the actual return, false returns being put in because the P10 EFIN issue.
Right.
That's probably the biggest, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a huge one, because when we start seeing these returns coming in, and if the tax practitioner contacts us, then we need to know, oh, well, what happened? Why didn't you have a plan? Where is your plan? What is your plan? So that definitely raises an eyebrow on our end to look into that.
From our perspective is that, but the other thing that was brought up in one of your stats in BEC, which is business email compromise, the FBI has been also tracking this for years and years and years, and it is always the largest area of compromise, bar none. For everything else added up, all the other areas they track added up together still doesn't exceed what BEC, business email compromise, does every year. You can go look on the FBI site, far as back as you want to go, and everything kind of is like here, and then business email compromise. It's always the biggest one out there.
It's out there. I'm going to tell you a little quick story right quick about me. I should be embarrassed to tell you, but, I work in a federal building, federal computer. So, everything is locked down. We have to go through security. We have to put our card in. We have passwords, which are changed all the time. But, we have to take training every year, all kinds of training. Security is one of them. So one day I get an email, and it's from the Federal Credit Union. I'm a member of the Federal Credit Union. The credit union is in this federal building. It's like upstairs. Get this email that says, blah, blah, blah. I forgot what it said, but we need you to, click here to verify something. My brain is, I'm at work. This is our laptop. We don't get any type of, advertise. Nothing comes on this computer but legitimate stuff. I click the link, and guess what happens? You're laughing, Wayne. You're probably already guessing. It just starts going, wah, 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 wah. It's flashing, this big flashing red, all this kind of stuff. And then I get an email that says, this was a test. Had this been an actual, spam phishing email? And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh. I go out and I give presentations about this all the time. And here I am clicking on this link. So, I said that to say it happens to the best of us. We think we're protected. It looks like a legitimate email. I mean, we have people out there pretending to be the IRS. And so people do it all the time. We just have to be careful about what we do, especially with these emails. If you have emails that are spam, that are phishing, you can send them to us at phishing, PHISHING, phishing at irs.gov. And we've caught a lot of these people and put them in jail. But, once we shut them down, they will try to go and pop up somewhere else. But yes, that is a huge imposition on everybody.
And that's an excellent point. And David's in charge of our whole security awareness training program, not only for us internally, but all our clients. And it is something that we religiously train on every month internally, even ourselves. Yes, we preach this. Yes, we know it. But with the advent of AI and what AI can do, the fakes out there are so good these days. You really got to be diligent about what you're doing. And what the simplest thing I tell people, and this is, I have a cousin of mine, he's a DJ. And when I wrote my first book, I was on with him. This is one of the topics we was talking about email copyright, phishing and all this. And he asked me, he said, well, how do you recognize it? I said, well, part of it is understanding how you communicate and how people you associate with communicate. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Gary, you know me. If I called you and or emailed you and say, hey, Gary, how's it going? What's going on? He says, well, that ain't you. I said, why? He says, because you always say, hey, cuz. I said, that's my point, is understanding how you communicate, understanding how businesses communicate with you. That's one of those things that you need. That's my first guard. When someone comes, I go, my bank don't communicate to me that way. This is bogus. And lots of times what I'll do is tools we go analyze it. But the first thing I do is I'll pick up the phone. I'll call my business manager at bank, say, hey, I just got this email that says you're going to do. He says, that's not us. Get that second form of verification. If you got the hair on your neck, stand up, kind of like you did, but you clicked anyway. You get that hair on you, your mind's telling you subconsciously, hey, something's not right here. It takes an extra couple of minutes. Just call them, verify it and all this, and it'll save you a world of hurt. So to me, it's all about how we communicate and understanding how people communicate. If you don't bring that in, you're opening yourself up to a world of hurt.
Right.
So, closing remarks. We've got 3 minutes left. Anybody want to share anything? And this has been great. We're going to have you back, Velena.
Okay, great. Awesome.
We'll
here.
get some other topic. We'll dig into it a little bit more. But you
Wayne, I've got a quick question. Now, you may or may not be able to answer this, but I've had a couple different tax preparers ask me this. When they're preparing taxes for people, they'll need a driver's license. They'll need a bank statement. They'll need some piece of stuff to complete it. And their clients will send it via text, or they'll send it via email with confidential PII information in it. What is that tax preparer's responsibility to get rid of that data? Is just deleting the text, deleting the email good enough, and letting the client know, no, you need to bring that documentation in or send it via an encrypted method?
Well, that may be, I know we have here at the IRS now, it took us years to get to this point where we can accept information via email, but it is encrypted. It is through a special, document upload tool. And I know that may cost a lot, especially for those small firms or whatever, but that may be what they have to do. You have to bring this in. I have to look at it, hold it in my hand, and not send it, say, we do not accept attachments via email or, scan. So that might be, what they have to do to verify that it is real and it's, it's theirs, and to protect themselves from.
So for example, if they were to send a letter out before each tax season to all of their current clients explaining that they shouldn't text it, they shouldn't email it, is that enough protection for them not to be in trouble?
Well, it's due diligence. Yeah. So we have due diligence that all tax practitioners have to follow. And if they're, that's on our website, due diligence for tax practitioners. And if they're doing what they're supposed to do to protect themselves, then that's all we can ask. We can't say, well, you didn't try, at least try to follow the due diligence rules.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yep.
Darren, you got any closing things?
I was just going to say what David was just mentioning. I think is one of the biggest risks for tax preparers, the emails going back and forth unencrypted, because that email resides on the taxpayer's mail account, and it resides on the tax preparer's mail account. Also, when that tax preparer leaves the tax preparer to go to another one, they may email that information to the next tax preparer that now has it on their servers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I've seen through emailing back and forth of like 8879s and 1040s, those two documents, you get the P10 and the EFIN in both those documents if they're not masked. And I've seen them masked and unmasked from the same preparer, from the same system, based on different circumstances. I think that could be the number one cause of theft of EFIN P10, because these business email compromises that Wayne talks about are rampant. And the most difficult ones to spot are when the actor takes control of a legitimate contact of yours, like your attorney, and he emails you based on their behalf from their email account and asks for information. We've seen it happen. People log in to whatever site they're asking them to log into. They give up their Microsoft credentials, even with MFA, and the actor's into their account. So the other thing I would say is everything's in layers. Security is a layered approach. You got to have multiple things in place to be effective in protecting customer information. The last thought I'll leave you with is implement the plan, build the house.
Yep.
Don't just design it.
Yep. Sounds good. Well, Velena, I really enjoyed this. Glad you could be on with us. We'll find a way to get you back on. And David
Okay,
and
sounds
Darren,
good.
appreciate you guys joining. For everybody out there, if you got any questions, just reach out to us. We also supplied Velena's McRae's information. So if you got a question for her, go ahead and go do that. But if we can help you in any way, you just reach out to us. We'd love to work with you, and we enjoy educating you on how to do these things. So until next month, have a blessed day. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.